Haint story.
See what else is going on.
They said these were scary Saturdays, so I'm going to scare y'all good. Because this is a true story.
Uh-oh.
Right over the ridge on the Madison County line, there was a little cabin that sat there, and that is where that Mary and Katie wound up living. Mary and Katie inherited the place from their grandparents, and they passed on, moved down into the little valley there to the cemetery. They left the girls that cabin up on top of that mountain. Well, now, Katie was the sweetest thing. She was just beautiful, too. Had long, blonde, flowing hair, peach-colored skin, great big old blue eyes, and she was just as pretty on the inside as she was on the outside. Sweetest thing you've ever seen. And then there was Mary. Now, Mary was an attractive woman. Everybody said she was just as attractive as she could be, but she wasn't near as friendly and outgoing and sweet as Katie was, and so Mary didn't get as much attention. And so when the new feller moved in, that was a blacksmith, moved into the community, he, while they're talking about who's going to put the shirt on whose shoulders over here, I'm just going to let them go on around the corner of the building. Because this is real important. You need to get this. You see, when the blacksmith moved into that part of the world up there, on the mountain, everybody said, well, wasn't it a good thing that Katie wasn't there, that she had gone down into Black Mountain to visit with her aunt, because if she had been there, that boy never would have noticed Mary. But since Katie wasn't there, Mary had him all to herself for about 6 weeks. And then Katie came home because the aunt over in Black Mountain got better, and she rode the train and came back home. And the minute she stepped off that train, who do you reckon she saw right off?
The blacksmith.
That's right. I've got my best student right up here on the front row.
He is real smart.
The blacksmith. That's exactly right. His name is John James. He had one of those 2 first names. And so John noticed Katie right off. When she went to church, he just about swooned. She was so beautiful. And he thought, oh no, now I'm in a pickle. I have been walking out with Mary and walking with her back and forth to church every Sunday. And now here's this beautiful vision that has come to live in this part of the world. And I've just got to spend more time with her because I think she's just the finest thing I've ever laid my eyes on. Well, now that set them 2 sisters at odds, don't you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, but after he got his eyes laid on Katie, there was no convincing him why he forgot Mary even existed. And that made Mary oh so jealous. And she kept that jealousy with her for a long, long time. And I know that for a fact because the rest of the story will bear that out. Well, what happened was, John finally went and talked to Mary and said, look, I'm awfully sorry that this has happened, but I have fallen just head over heels in love with Katie, and I don't know anything other than to marry her, and I'm just asking for your forgiveness and for your blessings on our marrying. Mary said, well, I'll never forget it, and I'll never forgive you either, because you made a fool out of me in front of the whole community, and I don't want nothing to do with either one of you. So she stormed off, and then she went and stayed with the aunt over in Black Mountain for a while. And, of course, John and Katie just got closer and closer, and finally he asked her to marry him, and he had a little ring that his grandmother had given him, and he put it on Katie's finger like an engagement ring, although it didn't have a little diamond or nothing in it. It had some kind of a little red stone. But you would have thought it was the prettiest diamond ever was, the way that she showed it off to everybody and how it would twinkle in the sunlight and all. And she'd carry her hand around, say, look at my hand, I've got the prettiest ring you've ever seen in your life. Well, Then Mary came back home, right in the middle of them making the marrying dress and of the bridesmaids and the matron of honor and all of them people. And oh, Mary wouldn't have a thing to do with nothing. She didn't help make the dress. She wouldn't agree to be the maid of honor. She wouldn't agree to be nothing in that wedding, and it just broke Katie's poor little heart because she was so tender-hearted anyway, and she worried about it. But she was so much in love with John, too, and he had built him a little cabin, I bet a lot like this one. Had a dog trot that ran through the middle of it, and had a big roaring fireplace in both rooms on either side of the dog trot, so they were set up pretty good. And, well, the day come for him to get married, and the preacher stopped and picked everybody up, and they rode up there with the preacher and his wife on the way to the wedding, and they got to the church house, and well, John wasn't there. But that was all right because they was early, and so they went on in the church, and everybody was getting ready, and of course Mary wasn't there either. She would not agree to come, and they waited on John, and well, you know, about 15 minutes went by, and then he still hadn't showed up. And then it was a half hour, and then it jumped up to an hour, and John still wasn't there. So they finally, about 4 o'clock, way up in the day, the preacher said, well, honey, people has to go home to get their chores done and the milking done and all that stuff. So I'm afraid we'll just have to do this on another day. Something must have happened, and you need to send your daddy down there to check on him and see what happened to him, because there's no reason why he shouldn't have been there. Well, her daddy went down to the house, you know, that he had built for him and Katie, and there laying on the bed was his clothes, just like he was fixing to step in them and come on to the church house. And shoes had been polished and was right there at the edge foot of the bed, you know, sticking up under the edge of the bed a little bit. And well, her daddy was a tracker, and he got out and was going around the cabin and looking, and he found this set of footprints that went there, but there's just one set that went down to the little river behind the cabin. It might even have been the Tow River for that matter. But anyway, he followed it down to the river, and it disappeared into the river, and he didn't see it coming up on the other side. So there was a real mystery as to what had happened to John James, because he was just gone. They never did see him again. He just disappeared. And they figured finally that some robbers might have set in on him, and he was just, they had taken him down there and thrown him in the river, and he'd gone on down the river. That's all they figured had happened to him. But oh, now Katie was just killed. She cried and wouldn't eat nothing, and cried and just finally, well, she just died. She developed pneumonia in one lung, and then she got double pneumonia. And back then they didn't have any antibiotics or any of that stuff, and so she just died. They said she mourned herself to death. Well, they fixed her up in her wedding dress to bury her in, and there, bless her heart, was that little ring a-twinkling on her finger. And they said, well, just leave it on there, and we'll put it 6 feet in the ground with her. And Mary had sort of come around after all that happened, you know. So she was busy getting people stuff to eat, and that had stopped by there for the setting up. And finally, everybody was ready to go to the church house for her funeral, and then they was going to take her on and bury her up in the graveyard. And the preacher's wife noticed that Mary was in there with Katie, and she said to the preacher, well, now that's the way it should be. These girls have to sort of make up, and there's only one of them left now, and so we need to try to help Mary as much as we can. Well, the preacher, while he was looking through there, he noticed that Mary's hand disappeared down over into the coffin there that they had made for Katie, and when she came back out, she had her fist all balled up and stuck it down in her apron pocket. And that preacher said, I wonder if she took that... No, she wouldn't have took that ring off of her finger. So they took Katie on to the church house, and they had her funeral, and then they buried her. Well, time passed, and it was... the summer went by, and it was up in the fall, about this time of year. Just starting to get a little chilly outside, but it still would come up those big rainstorms, you know, like it does in the fall of the year, and the thunder and the lightning, it was flashing, and that was the kind of storm they was having. Well, that cabin is sitting up on the line there between Madison and Yancey County was just getting washed away just about it. But Mary was up there by herself. Now, she got real peculiar after Katie died, and so she wouldn't let nobody come in the house, and just up there by herself, and she'd talk to herself and stand over next to the window with her hand up, and she sure did take that. I believe she took that ring off of Katie's finger and had it on her own hand. She would have had to. Well, during that storm, all of a sudden the door blowed open, and standing there in that door was the awfulest looking thing you have ever seen in your life. Now, you could tell the dress was a Marian dress, because it was made out of white lace and satin. And there it stood in that door. And with this long, kind of stratty, yeller hair hanging down on either side of its face. And oh, its face was a sight. There was those little white worms. What are they called?
Maggots.
Maggots, that's right. Kind of squirming around in the eye holes and the work in the, you know, in its mouth and the nose holes and all down in its ear holes. And I don't know, but it scared Mary about half to death when she realized what was standing there. She said, Lord, have mercy, Katie. You've come back from the grave. Now, why would you come back for the grave? And she balled her hand up real tight and stuck it down in that apron pocket as far as she could get it down in there. What'd make you come back? And I don't know how it managed it, but from out of that hole where all them worms was working and the crawling, came this. I mouldered away in the cold, cold clay. She said, oh, Katie, honey, it really is you. Lord, I didn't... Oh, you look awful bad, Katie. What happened to your beautiful long yellow hair? It's kind of stratty looking, and there's worms crawling around in it and stuff. Now, Katie, I don't know. It was so pretty, and Mommy had fixed it so good when they first laid you down in the coffin, and they laid you in the ground, and now here you are back, and I don't know why you're back, but what happened to your hair, Katie? And from out of this thing said, it mouldered away in the cold, cold grave. So, well, now she felt like she needed to keep this thing a-talking, you know, and she said, well, what happened to your beautiful dress? I mean, Mommy worked so hard on the sewing and everything. It's kind of ratty looking, and these worms are working in it too. I don't know, Katie. You look a sight. You're in bad shape, Katie. And out of this thing came, it all mouldered away in the cold, cold grave. Now, Mary wasn't no coward. I'll have to give her that much. Because she just decided, I am going to take care of this situation right now. And she reared back and looked at that thing and said, well, just tell me this much then. What happened to that pretty little ring that you had on your finger that John James gave you before he run off with some other woman and left you? And from out of that thing standing there in the doorway came, you got it! Now, if you want to see a bunch of children's hind ends come about that far off the